Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. This is Reservations, and I'm Jeremy Blair.
And I'm Rain Wayland. So, I hope the light is not distracting, just because
Right.
You normally turn on the lamp that we have over here in the corner.
Yeah.
As my wife has pointed out, it's the video quality on my MacBook is not good, and I should use her laptop. And I'm like, it's because the overhead light is too harsh.
Yeah.
That light is too soft, so it's not compensating the camera on my MacBook properly. So I may just have to, because like it's the overhead light. Like it's like when I do this, if people are watching, you can see that my hand is blocking it. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not gonna sit here the whole episode and be like, there we go.
You need to hang something, you know?
Maybe.
It's too late now.
I don't know. It's too late. We've already begun.
Yep.
Even though there's podcasts out there where people literally like step away from the mic mid-episode and then come back in, but we're professionals.
Yeah, we're not that type of show, you know?
Yeah,
other shows
that's true.
have more than one camera and have fancy edits. We're also not one of those either. Other podcasts get paid. So,
That's true.
You know, it's just you get what you get, you know?
I haven't seen no damn paycheck for this yet.
That's right.
Before we get going on this episode, Jeremy, I think we should address the elephant in the room. Your shirt.
Yeah, I found it in the back of my drawer. It's Patrick's Star. I also have his shorts as swim trunks as well, and so there are times when during the summer I'll wear the full ensemble.
Yeah, when we all went to Balmorhea together.
That's right.
I thought that was the coolest thing ever, and I was like, damn, he's gonna be the coolest guy here.
I'm the coolest guy at the beach. No, that actually, to be honest, might be the last time I wore it. Yeah, so it's been a few years.
Yeah, because that was Alba's birthday.
Gotta change it up. Gotta, switch up the shirts every now and then. Now that I'm not doing the whole gray thing, so
just the new thing is just you just wear Patrick's face.
Originally, the idea was to wear a very noticeable shirt every week. That, of course, I was wearing the same one every week, and it would have been so obvious. But I just wanted gray. I don't know. There's time. There's time in future seasons to do whatever I want. Maybe I'll wear a hat one season. The season of hats.
That's what I should rename the playlist to on YouTube. The season of the gray shirt.
That's
the
right.
Season of you gotta get yourself some Luna Lovegood glasses and just wear them the whole
season.
Yeah.
We're talking about something very tragic, like another Dear Zachary type movie, and I'm wearing these stupid fucking glasses.
Like, man, I just can't believe that someone could stoop so low.
Yeah. And... Jesus.
Oh, God.
Welcome back. Speaking of elephants in the room, let's do this one. I have a confession to make to our audience, and that is I accidentally, only because it was an accident because I watched the physical disc, I accidentally watched the theatrical version of The Fellowship of the Ring for this episode. I did not watch the extended version this time. I'm so sorry. At first, I popped it in, whatever. It's been so long since I've seen these movies, so I popped it in. I'm like, that's what's up. Okay. Check the runtime. I was like, oh, that's 3 hours. It's pretty steep for one disc. That's kind of weird. And then as it goes along, we're getting further and further into the plot and into the story. And then, it wraps up and I go, one disc, huh? That's wild stuff. And then I take it out and it's a theatrical version. So it's my bad.
Now, I don't have the 4K. I have the Blu-ray version. But it's been a while since I've cracked open the Blu-ray version because we watched it on Max.
Oh, okay.
But the Blu-ray version has both versions on the disc, right?
No,
I'm
well, I watched the 4K, and the 4K has the theatrical disc, and then it has 2 extended discs. So it splits it between.
I'm 90% certain that's how they kind of have it done with the Blu-ray, where it's
split down the middle.
But it's all on one disc, so you can choose between. And then if you do the extended, then of course you'll have to pop in disc 2 to continue watching. I don't know. It's been a while.
Yeah, but I goofed. I goofed bad this time, but that's okay.
I mean, I think you're allowed, considering I never finished Hereditary.
I guess, but the thing is, I'm not over here like I don't got no problem with Peter Jackson or whatever. I'm just like here, just
goofing,
trying my best. And
now, can I be honest?
Yeah,
I have seen these movies so many times because when I was working at AT&T, I would put them on to pass the time. Yeah. Exclusively the extended versions. So that way I could really fill that time. So like I probably would have known almost immediately, like, this is the theatrical version.
Yeah, it didn't even occur to me.
Well, everyone, if you're wondering what we're doing today, today is going to be part 1 of a 3-part series for the show that I picked. And this may or may not bite us in the ass, but you know what? These movies especially, it's about the destination, not the journey.
That's right. That's not true. It's about the journey, man.
So today we are talking about The Lord of the Rings, starting with the first movie, The Fellowship of the Ring. I feel like we would have really fucked ourselves if we were like, we'll just talk about the whole thing.
It'd be impossible.
Yeah, that would be impossible. So I know we usually ask each other, or I usually ask, when you remember seeing this movie. But I mean, that was so long ago. So I do want to ask, Jeremy, when you did see this movie, what impression did it leave on you?
I really liked it. I liked movies like this around this time. I think the year before Harry Potter had just come out, and so I was really stoked about those. And then I remember my mom being so excited about Lord of the Rings. And when it came out, waited a while before I saw it, probably a year or so. Because I was young,
Yeah.
I was in the 3rd grade probably when the first one came out. And so she probably thought I was a little too young. And then a couple years later, I watched it with her, and I loved it. I thought it was great. I don't remember it being that long. It's about 3 hours. The theatrical cut, which would have been the one that I saw at that time. and I remember Mom being so excited that when the Two Towers came out, we went and saw it on Thanksgiving Day, I think, when it came out. And then the same with Return of the King. We saw it the day it came out because, again, Mom and I were just stoked. We did the same with Harry Potter's as well. So, we would take off school to go see these movies at times. But yeah, so they were a pretty big deal in my house. They still are. Mom will watch. She doesn't do it every year anymore, but she used to annually watch the extended editions plus the special features. It would take her a few days, but she would.
Yeah, I don't even remember the first time I saw Fellowship, but I do remember one, it freaking me out because it was just so scary. Yeah. But of course, Peter Jackson coming from, which we'll get into, but coming from a horror background, of course, he nails the few horror elements. But yeah, I just remember being scared, but also being like so drawn to it. Again, like you said with like Harry Potter, it kind of reminded me a lot of Harry Potter, but I don't want to say more grounded Harry Potter because this movie is also very fantastical. But, you know, seeing wizards that don't cast spells.
It's grittier than Harry Potter for sure, 100%. I mean, it's more of a fantasy. It's more of a like an Arthurian fantasy.
Yeah. But yeah, I just remember being so blown away and falling in love with this world. And then of course, you know, when I got more and more deep into film, learning that Peter Jackson shot all three back to back to back, which we're definitely going to talk about, even just added more to this new love I had for Lord of the Rings. Yeah. And of course now, I've watched them so many times. I enjoy watching them. They never get old. And I think the proudest moment was me like finally wearing Ashley down to watch them. And I want to say in our group chat with Alex, I was like, I said that like I finally got her to watch them, and we did the extended versions. And Alex was like, "Why didn't you do the theatrical?" I'm like, nah. For her first time, she's gonna see the extended, like
deep end, just tossing her in the deep end.
Yeah, and of course she loved it. She even has said she's gonna rewatch the movies with me. Although it did take us much longer than 3.5 hours to get through that movie because she was like, "Okay, wait a minute, pause." I'm like, okay, yes, and she would ask me questions, just because I know a little bit more, just because I've done so much research, even though I've never read the books. I've tried to. They're very hard.
It sounds hard. Yeah, it sounds hard to read these books. Yeah.
And like I told you when we were in Austin, we tried to listen to the audiobook read by Andy Serkis, which was awesome. But it was very much like we were getting like we were in a lecture.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, makes sense considering Tolkien was a professor.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so Jeremy, would you like me to try to give a synopsis, or do you just want to skip that?
I think it's okay that we skip the synopsis. I would say like, I say we can skip the synopsis. That's fine. It's Lord of the Rings. Like, it's fine.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. So where would you like to begin? Because we do have quite the task ahead of us.
We do. And just to get it all cards on the table, we're going to miss a lot of stuff. We're not going to cover some of this stuff. I am not an expert in literature. I'm not an expert in literary studies or literary analysis. So the books are kind of on their own at this point. I've never read the books, not the review. So I can't speak on that. I can speak on the filmmaking and the storytelling and how the film is presented to us. I can do that, but I can't do the other stuff. And references if you want to other Tolkien stuff, I'm also going to have a hard time with. Things outside of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, and if you're looking for something like that, Future Rain hopefully will credit a video, the same video I sent you from a YouTube channel called The Deep Dive, where that's what they do. They do a deep dive into film and cinema, and they did a whole series on The Lord of the Rings. So hopefully Future Rain will credit that up in the corner. So if that's what you want to watch, cool. Watch us first, and then you can watch them.
Well, and essentially what we do on this podcast is we basically just have, it's a movie club. We watch a movie, we get together, we talk about it, and we record it for other people to watch. So, like, I think we're going to cut ourselves some slack on this one early.
Yeah.
And these are our perspectives. This is how we digest the movie. This is how we digest the story. And we'll go from there.
Cool. So, buddy, where would you like to begin? Would you
Well,
like to begin with the filmmaking or the story?
no, I think we should do story because we can
Okay.
get to the filmmaking aspect later on the second half. But this first half, we can discuss the actual story itself.
Yeah. So, from what I understand, again in that video, big shout out to that video. That's what kind of helped me kind of draw a lot of the questions that I've had over the years about these movies. But from what I understand, Peter Jackson and his team, Fran and Philippa, they stuck very close to the source material, which is great. I think only a few things omitted or a few things changed. So I feel like you are getting the full scope of the story, especially leading off with Fellowship. And I love that in the opening parts of the story, we get this open narration from Kate Blanchett, Lady I
Gladriel.
was saying, yeah, I was saying it all day Saturday, and now I can't even say it. But I love that Peter Jackson info dumps on us, and apparently, again in that video, he was worried about doing that, but I'm glad he did because
Understandably.
this is the perfect setup to kind of thrust everyone into the world of Lord of the Rings.
Well, of course, it's so dense and it's so full of information that you need that it's the only way to do it. I think it's the reason why if you start, like you said, when you started listening to the book, it just feels like a lecture because you have to have backstory in order to appreciate and understand the story that's about to be told to you. And so, I actually love the narration in the beginning. I love the. I don't consider it exposition. I consider it backstory. And originally not supposed to be Kate Blanchett. Originally they had, I think, Ian McKellen and Elijah Wood both recorded voiceover narration for that opening, but it didn't seem right because we needed sort of an all-knowing, sort of omnipresent figure, which are the elves, right? The elves are ageless and timeless, and they seem omnipresent. They seem otherworldly because they don't age and because they lived for so long.
Yeah, and there was even an argument of then like why didn't Hugo Weavy do it? And it's because he was still relatively not necessarily unknown, but they were filming The Matrix and this around the same time.
At the time, this is so crazy. So at the time they were working on these sort of details of the movie, The Matrix hadn't come out yet. So
yeah,
Hugo Weaving was not a bankable star yet, which is so weird, right?
I know now. Yeah, now we're like it makes sense. They should have done, but
of course.
Yeah.
But I like that it wasn't him because he's already in those battle sequences.
Yeah.
And so I didn't need two Hugo Weavings at the same time. One is
what you're saying is Matrix Reloaded. That was too many Hugo Weavies.
Too many. We know my stance by now on these sequels for the Matrix.
But yeah, I agree. We get this again. It is an info dump, but like you said, I don't see it as exposition. I see it as backstory, which is very integral, especially to a movie about fantasy and evil overlords and and I love that it doesn't waste its time. And what I mean by that is Peter Jackson doesn't spend 15 minutes telling us his backstory. He tells us the points we need to know. These 20 rings, because I counted 20 rings were made. 3 for the elves, 7 for the dwarves, 9 for men, and then the One Ring itself. We understand who Sauron is, why he's wanting to take over the world, and like, and it's the perfect amount of info dump. It truly is.
Yeah, no, I agree. I thought it was very well done. And again, even at the very beginning, you get to see the scope and the scale and just how massive this movie is going to be. With these battle sequences and these imageries, it really does stand itself apart from other movies you'd seen before. At least in that, general time period. Obviously, there are gigantic, huge epics from the 50s and 60s, like with the Ten Commandments and Ben-Hur and Lawrence of Arabia. I would say those films have really influenced The Lord of the Rings and just its scale alone and the way that it was shot.
I agree. And then
we'll get to the filmmaking later.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, and then I still love in this info dump we get sort of a prelude to the Hobbit of Bilbo finding the ring in Gollum's cave. Shout out to our boy Ian Holm, R.I.P.
R.I.P.
Ashley asked me, because I also made her watch the Hobbit movies. Because kind of what we were talking about at work, I was like, when I told her, I was like, now you need to see what happens when Peter Jackson doesn't have 3 years to plan a trilogy, and initially wasn't supposed to be a trilogy. Because she asked me, she was like, do they redo this in The Hobbit? I'm like, kind of. I mean, because she thought that they had like reshot it, like how they did it for Fellowship, and I was like, no, it's more how the book lays it out, how Bilbo and Gollum meet. But I love when we meet Bilbo, because this is where Cate Blanchett's narration stops and it becomes Bilbo telling us the story. Again, I'm going to be referencing that video a lot. That's something that Eric, the host of that, says, which is, at least with Fellowship of the Ring, it's a story about stories.
Yeah.
And I love how smoothly in the story that Peter transitions us from all this info dumping about Sauron and the One Ring to now info dumping us about the hobbits.
And what I love about this section of the film is Peter Jackson is painting you a picture of Hobbiton as a place you never want to leave. You never want to leave the Shire. It's so pleasant and warm and inviting and happy. People are genuinely happy there. So why would anyone leave? And so it makes it harder when Frodo almost, he's forced to leave, and Sam is forced to leave, and then Merry and Pippin just tag along because they're bored. And now we're going to lose that part of them, which is, they're leaving this warm and happy place, which is, I love how Ian Holm plays Bilbo as someone who has left, who has seen the world outside of the Shire in his back, and even in his speech for his 111th birthday, that, coming back from the events of The Hobbit has made him colder and more distant, and less inviting to those around him. And it's very quick. Like, we don't dwell on it too much about these feelings that he has. And of course, the weight of carrying the ring with him. That as soon as he lets go of it, I mean, it's like 200 pounds is lifted off his back.
Yeah. Here, I found the quote. I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, and I like this and half of you half as well as you deserve.
Right. So again, he's
essentially saying like, hey, you guys are deserving of a friend, but I can't be that friend because I've changed, and I have no one to talk about this with, But yeah, and I love, like you said, when when he finally leaves the ring behind, I love that. It is sort of like a weight off his shoulders, and what was it? Someone did bring up, and I may be jumping a little bit ahead, but since we're still kind of talking about Bilbo, that the fact that he doesn't kill Gollum after he takes the ring is kind of proof that the ring wasn't really corrupting him as much, because Bilbo was still good in heart, but the ring was still prolonging his life. And
well, that's why I think a hobbit is the perfect person to hold the ring, because a hobbit won't be as corrupted as much or as quickly as some, because there are moments in the film where we see hints of what that ring could do to someone with more power, with both Gandalf and Galadriel, because they both have their moments. When Gandalf is confronting Bilbo about the ring, we see how menacing Gandalf can be. And then the same with Galadriel. Galadriel becomes very frightening when she's talking about the ring to Frodo.
Yeah.
And this is what the ring could do to other races, to other people with immense power, where Frodo has so little power, but is able to withstand the control of the ring. My mom's very proud of me for saying that. I wish she was here. I have paid attention.
No, I agree, man. But it is sort of, this burden, as the fellowship kind of hammers home, and not in a beat you over the head way, but hammers home that this burden was placed on Frodo. He didn't choose this for himself, but it is now his burden to bear, and he must be the one to bear it.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're jumping around a little bit there.
That's okay.
I'm gonna take a little bit of a step back and talk about real quick someone who steals every scene as soon as he's introduced. Sir Ian McKellen as Gandalf. Like, I think when that day finally comes and he leaves this world, I think everyone will always know him as Gandalf.
More than likely, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Sir Ian McKellen is.
I did say Sir Ian McKellen.
I know, I was repeating.
Okay.
Is remarkable. He's amazing. The juxtaposition of that behind the scenes photo of him dressed as Gandalf on his MacBook. Like, I don't know if you've seen the behind the scenes photo. It's hilarious. Anyway, yeah, he's incredible. It's almost like this role was made for him, yet it wasn't supposed to be him at all.
It was supposed to be Christopher Lee.
Christopher Lee did audition, and they said he's too old, which, fair. Christopher Lee at that time, I believe, was 165 years old. And as a child, had met J.R.R. Tolkien. That was terrible. J.R.R. Tolkien. He was the only cast member to have ever met him. But yeah, he was a little too old. So Saruman was the better fit for Christopher Lee. And Sean Connery was offered the role, and he said he turned it down because he didn't understand the story. So that's Sean Connery. He beats women, and that's that. So,
what's not to understand James Bond? It's good versus evil.
I have no idea. To me, I think he got caught up in jargon, locations, and names. I think that's what he got caught up on. Would be my guess.
I mean, that makes sense, but also, come on, Ian McKellen is just, he crushes it in every scene.
He's amazing, and so that's why it's so bizarre to even think about anyone else doing it. And that's how good roles should be. It should be that they were so good in it that you can't imagine anyone else doing it. And
I have a
that's
little.
Ian McKellen.
I have a little funny story. I'm sure some people have seen it of Ian McKellen talking about how he and the late great Michael Gabon would often get confused for one, or like fans would confuse them.
Mm-hmm.
And Ian McKellen was telling the story on, I think it was the Graham Norton show, and he was saying how people will run up to me with pictures of Dumbledore and ask me to sign them.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was the other, where he was talking to Michael Gabon, and Michael Gabon was like, "Did they run up to you with pictures of me?" He's like, "Because I get that a lot." And Ian McKellen's like, "Yeah, they do." And he's like, "Well, what do you do in that situation?" And Michael Gabon's like, "Oh, I just sign your name." Or I think he said, "Or I sign my name," or something like that. But I don't know. It's just funny that these two legendary British actors, often their roles get confused.
Yeah.
Which,
I mean, that's fair.
it is fair. I mean, they're both playing these very wise mentors with giant beards.
Right.
But
yeah, long hair, giant beards, you know? I mean, it comes with the territory, you know?
Yeah, that's true. But okay, so kind of going back to the story, I love the introduction of Gandalf, because we know right away who this person is with his interaction with Frodo. Especially if you've never read the books, you can tell that he's not only, I wouldn't say silly, but he doesn't take himself too seriously until he needs to,
mm-hmm.
until the situation calls for it, you know. And I really think Ian McKellen just does that so well, of flipping back and forth between, haha, you know, we're having fun with some fireworks, but now, you know, then when he scares Bilbo, when he tries to scare Bilbo straight, you know, it's so good.
And I do appreciate them alluding to events that happen in The Hobbit. Mm-hmm. And it's organic. It doesn't seem, you know, shoehorned in. It doesn't seem like, I don't know, unauthentic. Even later in the film, when they go, when they're on their journey, and the stone giants, right? Giants. And they're surrounded by the stone giants that are in The Hobbit.
The stone trolls. Yeah,
trolls.
Yeah.
Thank you. The stone trolls. I like that, right? And especially, it's almost like they're like, if we ever make these movies, like, it'll all work together if you watch them all at the same time, or if you watch them all in a row. They fit together in a linear fashion, which I really, really like. It's like they didn't know. That was like 25 years ago, you know?
Yeah. But I do want to bring up real quick, just a little cliff note. If anyone's wondering if we're going to touch on the Hobbit movies, probably not. Just because Jeremy and I have differentiating views on those movies. I enjoyed them. I do see that they do have faults, but I think they're fine for what they are. Obviously, Lord of the Rings are the superior films, because as what we were talking about at work, Peter Jackson had way more time to plan out the Lord of the Rings, as where he had almost 75% less time to plan out The Hobbit. And that's because The Hobbit was originally going to be directed by Guillermo del Toro. Peter Jackson was going to produce it for him, but then Guillermo left because they never got the green light. And Guillermo really wanted to make the movie, but he was like, if we don't get the green light, I've got other projects I've got to work on.
Yeah.
And then ultimately he did leave, and Peter begrudgingly stepped up and was like, well, I don't know if you knew this, dude. They were like pre-production, everything. Like, they were making like armor, they were making miniatures of the sets to get the idea. And when Guillermo stepped out, and Peter was like, all right, fine, I'll do it. He's like, but all that, scrap it. He was like, I don't want people to think I'm trying to emulate Guillermo's style.
Right.
So that set them back even more because they had to redo all of the stuff they've already been working on. So to answer everyone's question, Zach's question, we're not gonna touch on the Hobbit movies, and mainly because, kind of like what you brought up, I don't think you need to. I mean, granted, in 1999 when they were filming these movies, they didn't think that they were ever going to do the Hobbit. So
no, but again, I think the books must work in this way where they're just so seamless together, going from one book to the other one, that the events of the Hobbit truly impact the events of Lord of the Rings so much that to not mention them would be silly, or to not mention them would be strange, because they matter so much. So, like when Gandalf first comes in to town, Frodo tells him, "Hey, man, people don't like
you."
And then, then Gandalf's like, because of the dragon stuff, that was forever ago, and I barely had anything to do with it. And of course, it's, that's the Hobbit, right?
Yeah.
And I love that stuff, right?
Well, and I think they were doing that not only because I'm pretty sure it is in the Lord of the Rings books, but also they were adapting essentially both books at the same time, taking elements from the Hobbit to sprinkle into the Lord of the Rings. But I enjoy it.
It makes all the sense in the world, because without Bilbo going on that journey, Frodo has nothing to do with it if Bilbo doesn't go. So
yeah,
it has everything to do with.
From what I gather, all of Tolkien's texts blend into one another. The Silmarillion, the Hobbit, and then the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Everything just kind of almost fits into perfect place.
Makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. Moving right along. So Jeremy, I want to ask you a very important question. I expected a very important answer.
Okay.
Which of the 4 Hobbits is your favorite?
Which of the 4 Hobbits is my favorite?
Can I tell you who's my least favorite? And this isn't because I dislike the character. He's just my least favorite. Pippin is my least favorite.
Really?
Now, granted, in this movie, he's my least favorite in this movie. Return of the King, I would say Pippin's a little bit higher up. But in this movie,
I would think Marion Took is my least favorite, because he's silly and goofy, which I like, but he's careless at times, which I don't like. I think Pippin is more level-headed, yet still silly. So I'm gonna go because Pippin's always yelling at Marion for something.
Now wait,
Marion always mouthing off.
Are you sure? Because Pippin is Billy Boyd and Mary is Dominic Monaghan.
Stand by.
I was about to say, I'm like, you might be getting them confused.
I don't think so, because maybe I did get them confused. Hold on. Marion, I like more than Pippin. You are correct.
Yeah. So I was about.
Okay.
I think we can collectively agree that at least in Fellowship, Pippin, he like I said, I don't dislike him. I just think he's my least favorite, just because he's the reason why they get chased by orcs in the Mines of Moria, because he just had to touch that skeleton.
Right.
He's the one complaining about Elevensies second breakfast, dinner, lunch, afternoon tea,
Right.
He has no idea what the secret meeting with the Council of Elrond is about, and he's like, you need people, for this sort of quest, mission, thing. And they're like, all right, well, I guess y'all are all going. And then he's like, where are we going? Like,
he was
like, come on,
not listening.
Come on. Yeah.
I mean, that is funny. You're right.
But again,
think,
but then when we get to Return of the King, which we'll get to in 2 weeks, Pippin is completely different.
Yeah, that's going to happen to everybody.
Correct.
Which I love. This story, I mean, I was going to save it for later, but this story is the hero's journey. It is Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey.
Yes.
Where you start off in one place, you circle back all the way to the beginning, and you're a completely different person. And you have to return. So when
the return is
everything.
Yes.
Because you need the contrast between where you were and where you are. And that's why Bilbo's there and back again is so significant, that he went, but he came back.
Yeah.
Changed as a different person. And we're going to see that with everybody. I would say in next week, my answer will change to Sam.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. Sam becomes my favorite in The Two Towers.
Oh, I thought you said I thought you were saying he's going to become your least favorite. That's why I was so shocked.
No. My favorite will become Sam in The Two Towers.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that. But
yeah. But can we just go ahead and pause for a second on Sean Astin, dude? Freaking Sean Astin. I love that dude so much.
Yeah, he's great.
And can I say, I find it interesting, and I've brought this up, I'm pretty sure I brought it up to you. I find it interesting that he's one of the handful of people from this movie that his career didn't skyrocket, because I mean, Sean Astin, of course, we all know, had been acting since the 80s, The Goonies, but started to kind of teeter off a little bit. Rudy, no. I think you're the only one that remembers Rudy.
Everybody remembers Rudy, but that's
fine. But I think we can all agree it started to teeter off a little bit, Encino Man. But then you would have thought that these movies would have just skyrocketed him. He was going to get role after role after role, like his co-star Elijah Wood was getting. But it seemed like, I don't know, he kind of teetered off again. I don't know if that was by choice or if he just wasn't getting the roles. But I feel like not in a negative way, because people still know Sean Astin.
Of course.
I mean, I know you hate this show, but I mean, he has such an integral part of season 2 of Stranger Things. Hashtag Justice for Bob.
Okay.
But anyway, I just wanted to. He dies in season 2.
Spoilers for season 2 of Stranger Things.
Yeah, that season that came out over 5 years ago. So the statute of limitations has gone away. But no, I just wanted to bring that up because I find it interesting, because Sam sort of, I would say, is the audience's North Star. Or no, I wouldn't say the audience. He's Frodo's North Star.
Definitely. I mean, he is
throughout the whole series.
Yeah. Sam is always there to protect and to assist Frodo in anything.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if you found an answer for this, but Ashley asked me this, and I didn't have an answer for her. Do you know why he calls him Mr. Frodo?
Yes. One of my first questions I ever asked Mom about Lord of the Rings in general, because I found it so odd, because they're the same age and
they're supposed to be friends.
And they're buddies, right? He's Bilbo's gardener, which means he works for Bilbo and Frodo.
So it's like one of those things where it's like, even though we're friends, there's a level of respect there that he feels like he has to give Frodo.
There's respect and a very slight hierarchy, because he works for the Bagginses. So it's Mr. Bilbo and it's Mr. Frodo.
Okay, that makes sense.
By the way, one of the funniest moments in the film, which there aren't a ton of these, but one of the funniest moments is when Gandalf pulls him into the house and asks him what he heard, and he goes, nothing, just a little bit about a ring and the end of the world. and a terrible thing that's going on, and he just like rattles off everything they just talked about.
I thought you were gonna say the whole like, you know, you're eavesdropping. I ain't dropping no eaves, sir.
I'm dropping no weaves.
Uh,
It's very much I ain't messing with no reefer addicts. All right. Whoa.
Wow, that was a deep cut. Shout out to season 1 of the show. Okay, so I didn't want to focus too much on the hobbits because I wanted to move on to our other characters, but
sure.
We talked about Sam. We talked about Sean Astin. We would be remiss if we didn't bring up Elijah Wood as Frodo. Because man, yeah, this movie, as I kind of said with Sean Astin, this movie really, I felt like catapulted his career into the zeitgeist. Because I mean, yeah, he just like Sean Astin had been acting since he was a kid. If anyone out there has seen The Good Son with Macaulay Culkin,
I was gonna say Back to the Future Part 2 at the.
Oh my God, that's right. He is Back to the Future Part 2. That's right. I forget about that constantly. But yeah, after these movies come out, everyone knows who Elijah Wood is.
Yeah.
Also, he seems like the nicest guy in the world. I'd love to meet him.
My favorite part, or my favorite thing, or his contribution to filmmaking, to I guess just film in general, is his production company that he runs and his love of low budget horror movies. I love Elijah Wood for this. So if you are in the market for a low budget horror movie, look no further than anything Elijah Wood has touched in the past, I don't know, 15 years.
Yeah, Elijah, you know, he's had such a successful career post Lord of the Rings, both on camera and off camera. Of course, you know, for me, the next big thing that he did later on was Wilfred, of course. You know, Wilfred's phenomenal.
Of course.
But yeah, you know, and Elijah as Frodo, I feel like he really carries the emotional weight of this film at every turn.
Yeah.
Especially in Gandalf's, what they think is his death.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, for first-time audiences seeing this movie, that we all think he's dead.
It is, yeah, he does.
And I remember hearing, I think it's in the appendices, the special features of the DVD and the 4K, where Peter Jackson not necessarily was worried that Elijah was the wrong choice. He knew that Elijah was the right choice for Frodo, but it's that scene when Frodo turns and looks back at the camera that he was like this is him. Like this was the perfect choice.
Mm-hmm.
Because the look of despair, you know, I think everyone can cite that is one of many iconic shots from this trilogy of Elijah looking back at the camera post seeing his mentor sacrifice himself for the rest of them.
Yeah.
But okay, so that's enough about the hobbits. Let's move on to our other characters, because this is technically an ensemble cast.
Yeah.
We have Viggo Mortensen as Aragorn.
Incredible.
Orlando Bloom, who also was relatively unknown, as Legolas.
He was cast, I just read this today, he was cast, I think it was 2 weeks before he graduated drama school. So he hadn't even graduated drama school yet, and he was cast as Legolas, yeah.
Yeah, and I think he said he got Pirates because of Lord of the Rings.
Of course.
But anyway, then we have the legend himself, John Rhys Davies as Gimli.
Mm-hmm.
And then the everyone knew he was going to be a goner anyway, Sean Bean as Boromir. And that's our fellowship. The 4 hobbits, Gandalf, Aragorn, Legolas, Boromir, and Gimli.
Yeah.
Now, here's another question for you, buddy.
Sure.
Who of the fellowship is your favorite?
It's Aragon. I don't even know why we're even having this conversation.
Is it because he's legitimately the most badass out of all of them?
I thought you were going to say handsome, but yes to all of
Oh.
them. No, Aragon is. I mean, he is a true hero. He protects those that that he is close to. He's dedicated to the task, and he's sort of like he's owed the throne, basically, right, to Gondor. Yet he's turned his back on God. Not turned his back, but he's like, I don't want it. Right? Yeah. He feels that he could do better somewhere else. And
he was
commendable.
He was Jon Snow before Jon Snow.
Yeah, cool ref. I don't get that either, but yeah, I mean,
in Game of Thrones,
through context.
Jon Snow was also he could have been the king of the North and also king of Westeros, but he didn't want it either.
Yeah, Aragon is just the coolest, and Viggo Mortensen just being cool in general. Like the behind the scenes are him fishing in between like them setting up shots and stuff.
Yeah, man. I had never known who Viggo Mortensen was until this, and then I remember seeing a trailer. You might remember this movie for a movie called Hidalgo that he was doing. Yeah, and I was like, oh my god, that's Aragon right there.
Yeah, seen it a few times.
Yeah, I think he's just had such a amazing career.
Agreed.
Doing all different types of stuff. He just recently did a Criterion in the Closet.
Oh, nice.
And what I love is he didn't do it the way other people do it, like, this movie. He already had them out and was like, yeah, I picked some Westerns. Here we go. And like shows the camera and like talks about it, puts it in the bag. Like, so he had already gone through, grabbed them all. And I was like, dude, what a very Viggo Mortensen thing to do, you know?
Yeah, he's incredible. He's perfectly cast, and he wouldn't have taken the role if it weren't for his son. So really, the thanks is to his son.
Shout out to Viggo Mortensen's son.
Yeah, he was. I think he was 11 or so at the time, and he was very apprehensive of taking on the role. And his son was a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. You know, the books, the 70s. Animated film, you know, whatever, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And he said, you have to do it. Like, why wouldn't you know? And he's like, and my dad can be Aragorn. Like, that's like the coolest thing ever, right? And agreed, kid, who is older than us now. Agreed, buddy. Little 11-year-old back then. Perfect choice.
Yeah, and then of course, you know, he's got the love of Arwen, Liv Tyler on his side too. Yeah. So yeah. Now I think we can all know I think I know the answer to this question. Who's your least favorite of the Fellowship?
You hate to say it. You hate to say it's Boromir, but
it's Boromir.
I mean, the dude. Okay, so Boromir did atone, did see the error of his ways.
Yeah.
You know, and then he died immediately. But, and it is hard. It's so hard when Boromir dies because he does kind of come to his senses, and he does see the importance of why it needs to be Frodo, and why Frodo can be trusted, and why this is so important, and that sure, one doesn't just simply walk into Mordor.
Did you know they were rewriting that whole council scene on the day? So he was given those lines on the day. So when he's like this, apparently he had taped the script to his leg.
That's funny.
So he could see, like, okay, one does not simply walk.
But he's, I mean, for his perspective, he's right. However, they know that it's the only way. And
Yeah.
once he finally understands, and then of course Boromir is one of your favorites, and then he dies. So
Yeah.
protecting the hobbits. So
I agree. You love to hate him throughout the whole movie until that last probably about 15 minutes when he's protecting Merry and Pippin, and he just gets absolutely owned by that Uruk-hai. But then he has that moment of reflection with Aragorn when he's like, where's Frodo? And Aragorn's like, I let him go. And he's like, well, then you did what I couldn't. And you're just like, fuck. Like, now we love him.
Man, we've skipped through a lot. But I did find that so fascinating while watching these movies for the first time was they split up. And now we're going on, now we've split them into two different things. So now when we go to the other movies, like they're completely separate stories. And I thought that was I was almost sad by it because I'm like, I don't want these people to not have one another. I want them to be together so they can protect one another and to, make it to Mordor as safe as possible. And then when they split up and, it was heartbreaking. I was really sad when that's how it ended. I was like, oh no,
Well, and
which is good storytelling.
And it's good storytelling, but also, it's to talk about, that fellowship. That's the name of the movie. That fellowship can't be broken. That even though, yes, our heroes are going on their separate ways, Gimli, Aragorn, and Legolas are going to go rescue Merry and Pippin, and Sam and Frodo are going to continue their journey to Mordor. That the fellowship still endures, even though, they lost Boromir, they think they lost Gandalf, and then they've all kind of splintered off. I think it is meant to be sad that they're all not going to go on the same journey together, that they are going to kind of go on these different paths, but they're still together.
Well, it's unexpected. It's unexpected that they split up in that
an unexpected journey.
In that Aragorn knew that was the right path. That was the right thing to do, is to let them go and to not keep them all together. That was the best option. I think as an observer, I wouldn't have thought that.
I think he knew that if they stuck together, they would probably either one get picked off one by one and die, or two, someone else would succumb to the power of the ring. And if it was just Sam and Frodo, knowing to trust Sam and Frodo, he knew, like, okay, neither one of them is going to become corrupted by the ring. They're safer on their own.
And of course, and they're not going to be corrupted. That's sort of the whole thing about them being hobbits, right? We touched on that earlier. And you're right. Here's a question. And when I was a kid, this is by far the coolest part of the movie to me, was anytime a Nazgul was on screen.
That's actually what scared me the most.
I thought they were the coolest things. Do you think, now, you had told that story earlier about Ian McKellen getting mistaken for Dumbledore. Do you think Nazguls get mistaken for Dementors? Yeah.
I don't think so, but my wife straight up jokingly was like, Dementors?
Yeah.
Like when they're all on the Weathertop scene. I was just like, so can I be honest? And we're going to get into it, especially when we get to the Two Towers and the Return of the King. So I was freaked out by them when I was a kid. Now that I'm older, I'm so fascinated by them because they used to be men. They used to be kings of men.
Right. They were the men in the beginning with the rings. That right?
Yeah.
That's my understanding.
Yes, because there's 9 of them.
Right. That Sauron corrupted them. Yeah.
Yes, because in the lore, Sauron helped with the forging of the rings, except for the elves.
That makes sense.
Well, no, I'm sorry. He helped with the elves, so he can't see their thoughts. He can see where they're at, so they don't wear their rings as often. But with the dwarves and the men, I believe he forged them. That way he could, one, see their thoughts, but two, see where they're at and control them.
Right.
But of course, the dwarves lost themselves to greed.
Right.
And all the dwarf lords ended up getting killed. But the 9 men succumbed to the darkness, and that's why they're now the Nazgul.
Because of their thirst and strive for power. Right.
Correct.
And that's how Sauron was able to corrupt them, right? And then they became the Nazgul, which they're so scary. And
dude,
their clicking noises, their sort of like growling noise, I loved it. I thought, and a little shout out to the 1970s animated film is that shot of them under the tree, and the Nazgul right above them.
Which was inspired by one of the illustration versions of Lord of the Rings. So, and can I say, I'm the most fascinated by the sort of the leader of the Nazgul, Angmar, the Witch King, which of course we don't know his name until Return of the King.
I see.
But still, I'm very fascinated with the Nazgul. Just because they kind of sort of come up a little bit. I know I said we weren't going to talk about it, but they do sort of come up a little bit in the Desolation of Smaug. Because Gandalf is told that the 9 has been seen leaving the High Fells, which is where Angmar was buried. Anyway.
Right, whatever.
Again, very fascinated about that history. But yeah. Dude, yeah, the ring wraiths scared me the most as a kid.
Yeah, sure. I mean, with
although I do have a question.
Sure.
Maybe you know the answer, or maybe you can help.
Okay.
How do you think Aragorn tricked them into going into the wrong room?
Man, that's a great question. I think because they can't really track Frodo until he puts on the ring. So
correct.
So he put it on at the bar or at the pub or whatever that was. Which the ring may have done that itself. Whatever. Who cares?
Yes.
The ring willed itself onto Frodo's finger as it fell. Now, they know where they're at. But that's all they got. That's where they are. So as soon as he took it off, they're really just following, like, they're at that
scent.
They're at that bar, right? And so as long as he doesn't put it back on, they can stage, like, hey, are there, hobbits here? And then, they're like, yeah, they're staying up there. That's all they know too. So that's I think it's because all they have to do, not put the ring back on, and go somewhere else. And it sounds like across the street, which I would have gone further, but that's
fine. Also, Ashley and I were like, well, hey, where are the other 5? Weren't they all traveling together? Why is there only 4 trying to, kill these hobbits? Are the other 5 just like waiting, like out on the horses, like come on, man. Like,
dude, all 9 don't want to be in there.
We got dinner. We got dinner resis, man.
Yeah, man.
Well, then what's even funnier is that the Weathertop scene, there's only 5, so it means 4 stayed behind.
Yeah, who knows? But okay. So the Nazgul, love the Nazgul.
Yes.
Excited to see them again, which is crazy because they're bad, but they're just so interesting, and they're like you said, they're like when he puts on the ring and he's able to see them. In the ring world, I don't know what else
it's. Oh shit! It has a name.
Of course, it does.
It's fuck. Keep talking.
Is it
Let
some
me
sort of
think.
realm, perhaps?
I think it is.
Ooh. My mom would know. Uh, it's, and I like that, by the way. I like that when he puts it on, his perspective changes. And he also disappears, which I also quite like. Which is how the Nazgul find Bilbo in the first place, because he puts it on during his birthday party.
Yeah.
And I do.
It's called The Unseen.
The Unseen. That's interesting.
Yes.
Which
the Nazgul can go in and out, since they're, as Aragorn says, neither living nor dead. So they can go into the unseen, but also be in the physical world as well.
Sauron sort of keeps them in between realms.
Yes.
I see. Okay. That's pretty much everything except for Rivendell.
Well, and look, I think the reason why we kind of skipped over a little bit over Rivendell is because Rivendell, although being a beautiful set piece, and them being that whole sequence being integral to the plot, not a whole lot happens. We get sort of, again, another sort of info dump about, Aragorn's lineage of being the heir to Gondor. We see the Fellowship come together, which is great. We see Hugo Weavy just crush it as L. Ron Hubbard.
Good. That was good.
Ashley brought that up the first time we watched it. She was like, wait, his name is Elrond? And I was like, yeah, why? And she's like L. Ron Hubbard? And I was like, no, not two separate letters.
Just one word.
Just one word. But I think it's the most, in my opinion, the most important scene in the Rivendell sequence is Frodo getting another sort of scare into the ring being so dangerous with that jump scare,
right,
with Ian Holm.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which is, shows Frodo like, hey, like, you can't let this thing get to you. Like, you have to destroy this thing.
I remember distinctly the first time I watched it with Mom. She warned me ahead of time. She goes, "Hey, Bilbo's gonna have a little scary part coming up. Okay, just be prepared." I said, "Okay," and it happened. I was like, "Whew, that was scary. Thanks, Mom."
Well, I distinctly remember no one warning me, so I distinctly remember freaking out,
just living in a world of chaos.
Yeah. But yeah,
well, see, I think that plus Gladriel's moments are very pivotal and very important in terms of really what's at stake.
Yeah.
And then of course he gets his chainmail.
His mithril.
Right.
Yeah.
I do have a statistic about the when we get to the filmmaking portions. I have a statistic on the chainmail. What you worry about that?
Ashley thinks Frodo's ultimately very useless in this movie because
he gets stabbed a lot. I mean, that's true.
He gets stabbed twice.
Yeah. Twice more than everybody else. Well, except for Boromir. R.I.P.
Oh yeah. Rip. Yeah, rip-a-doo skidoo to Boromir.
Yeah.
But it's okay, we're gonna meet his brother in the next movie.
That's right. Faramir.
Who's got a sadder story. But we're not gonna get to that yet.
No.
But okay, so Jeremy, I feel like we've really touched on the story. Again,
as best as we can,
because we did warn everyone, hey, we're not experts. We're gonna forget some stuff. But I would say the thing that we are maybe expertly good at is talking about the filmmaking.
Well, let's put experts in quotes still, but
yeah.
Yes. I think the magic sauce to this film, the aspect that sets it apart from every other film is the time and dedication and the work that was put in to making this movie. I mean, even as a kid, when mom would watch the special features, it's mind blowing. I
Yeah.
mean, you can't imagine, especially now, the type of work that went into making this movie. 3 years of pre-production. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what are we doing? What are we talking about? That's unheard of.
Yeah. Peter Jackson must have had some really good negotiating skills with MGM or New Line,
New Line, yeah.
which yeah, to be like, hey, look, trust me, give me 3 years and a big budget, you're gonna get that money back. Trust me.
Okay, let's talk about trust me, because okay, you have the Lord of the Rings. Okay,
Yes.
I assume the movie that got him Lord of the Rings is The Frighteners. And then the one before that, Heavenly Creatures, and then we have Brain Dead before that, or
Yeah.
Dead Alive. It's both. So not to mention Bad Taste, but you know, to me, I love The Frighteners. By the way, Dad and I were big fans. All right.
Mhm.
To me, I don't know if I would have seen Lord of the Rings in The Frighteners. I don't know if I would have seen that sort of. It sounds silly, but maybe a little bit in Dead Alive, because we're using big practical set pieces for a low budget. Okay, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
Frighteners not as much, but so you're right. The negotiating skills he must have had are legendary. I mean, you can't imagine, because it's again 3 years of, like, at least like a year or two in pre-production. I don't know if it was three in total, but
I feel like I read somewhere that it was 3, and
it
he
was a
was going to need 2
year.
years.
They built Hobbiton and left it alone for a year for vegetation to grow and for gardens to be planted and grown out, and for like it to look lived in. Like, they gave him the budget and the time to build basically a small town and leave it alone for a year.
Oh, and I think he had the that land's owners probably check in on it and just be like,
Oh,
hey,
I'm sure.
like just
I'm just saying, like, they didn't build it, shoot, scrap it. They built it,
yeah.
left it. Let's go do something else. And by the way, let's go do something else. I mean, this guy, oh my God. I was watching footage of some behind the scenes, and they would be shooting a scene on this part of the soundstage. And he goes, let me go check in over here. And they walk between one set of doors, a hallway, another set of doors, and it's Bilbo's birthday party. And it's being shot while, like, and he's just checking in. So,
Yeah.
a normal film, or I would say a typical average film, would have at least 1 to 2 units, right? Your primary, intersecondary unit.
Mm-hmm.
Secondary unit usually shoots establishing shots, close-up shots, pickups, things like that. There was 5 to 7 units shooting all at the same time for this movie. I looked up the budget because I was like, what's the budget for Fellowship? It was 93 million.
Holy shit.
Putting it in, I typed it into an inflation calendar today, or an inflation calculator, and it's 180. So it's twice the amount. But hold on, because I was thinking about it, I go 180 million, that's a lot, right?
Yeah.
But then I thought about, okay, we had people, hang on, I'm going to find it because I need you to know just okay. 12.5 million little plastic rings were made to use the chainmail. The people who put it together, handmade, put together each piece of chainmail, worn off their fingerprints and their index and thumbs. Okay. The Marvels was made for like $300 million. Okay?
Oh, fuck.
So when you say in today's money it's 180, that's still pretty low in terms of
Yeah.
the scale and the scope of it. So I would say, like, I would tack on another 180 just to have people work as hard as they did, because not only we are using some CGI, we're using some blue screen, we're using, we're using computer graphics for the troll and for the Demogorgon, not the Demogorgon, what's his name?
The Balrog.
The Balrog.
The
That
Balrog of Morgoth.
we're using CGI for these pieces.
Right.
We're using CGI to fill space. However, we're also using miniatures. We're using forced perspective. We're using rigs. And again, these actors should have been paid double their salary, because not only are they acting, but they're having to act in a very unique way where they're having to fix their eye line for forced perspective shots for size. So Ian McKellen is in the foreground, Elijah Wood's 3 feet behind him, but we're having to fix our eye lines as if they're right next to one another.
Yeah.
My favorite thing they built was the pulley system where the camera can move around the table and the table moves around them, so that forced perspective is never broken.
Mm-hmm.
It's ingenious. These films are miracles. I don't know. Yeah. It will never be done again. There is no way ever that a studio is going to be like, here's the money, here's 5 years, make 3 movies.
Yeah, again, I'm saying it again. I know I wasn't going to bring it up, but like you said, this would never get made again. With The Hobbit, they were trying new technologies to do forced perspective. Some of them worked, like the scene when Gandalf is supposed to be with all the dwarves. So they built kind of like what they did with Fellowship, building 2 different sets.
Mm-hmm.
One the size for the dwarves and Martin Freeman was Bilbo. And then they built a slightly smaller blue screen version for Ian McKellen. And then Ian McKellen wore an earpiece so he could hear all the other actors' lines. The only downside is Ian McKellen was isolated by himself in this blue screen room. And if anyone has seen those behind the scenes, he was struggling very hard. Because
the guy was lonely,
Yeah, he was lonely, and being such a classically trained actor, he needed to see the other people he was interacting with.
Of course.
Granted, thankfully, he found a way to make it work and stuck it out, because I don't think The Hobbit would have been even remotely good if Ian McKellen didn't come back.
Of course.
But, Peter tried all these new techniques because they could with The Hobbit, that some just didn't pay off. And like the forced perspective, they couldn't do that because they wanted to shoot The Hobbit in 3D. And
don't get me
shooting on a 3D camera with forced perspective, you can clearly tell you're trying to do forced perspective.
Yeah.
So he was like, well, we can't do that anymore. I'm like, yeah, you could. You just don't have to shoot on 3D.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a 3D movie, Mr. Jackson.
If you wanted it 3D, how about you just shoot it like normal and then convert it to 3D, like so many other films that were when the whole 3D craze was going on. But all that to say, again, you're right. The techniques that they use for the Fellowship, the Two Towers, and Return will never be done again. And that's sad to say, because these techniques could work with modern films, but that's also, I think, what makes Lord of the Rings so special, is that these techniques work so well for these movies.
I agree. It's not just the techniques. Now, the techniques are flawless. I mean,
yeah.
Again, the miniatures in the foreground, Like they showed one where it was, I don't know, like 300 feet in front of, or whatever it is, like, or a few hundred yards in front of where they needed to shoot. And it was like a bridge. And they're mapping out sort of like, okay, it looks good here, but what if when we do this? And they're like, oh, wait, no, that's fine. Okay, good. So it looks like Ian McKellen is riding his horse through this bridge. No, he's not. Right. But
Yeah.
But again, with the miniature in the foreground, which is how they've been making films forever, since the silent era, is classic filmmaking, and it works, and it stands the test of time because it's not going to look bad later. Yeah. It's not going to be compared. CGI is not going to be compared because it's not CGI. It's also, so again, it's not just the techniques that makes it so good. It's the planning. It's the meticulous planning. They built little models, and I loved this. Okay. They built little models and they put a little camera through it, and they would map out shots in the models for blocking purposes, for camera placement, for camera movement. So they would have their little model on the table, and then they'd have this little like pinhole camera, and they would have it on a screen, and they would put the camera in the model and see, okay, that's a good position, mark it. That's a good one, mark it. And then when they built the life-size version, they knew exactly where to put that camera because they've already planned it.
Yeah.
That's what it takes.
Yeah. And I think another thing with the planning stage, I think another reason why these films are so highly regarded, and again, rightfully so, is 90% of the movie is shot on location in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And the other 10% is on sound stages and blue screen. And again, I think that's where The Hobbit falters. They kind of flip those numbers. Where I would say, I'll be a little bit more gracious and probably say about 20% of The Hobbit is filmed on location, and then the other 80% is sound stages and blue screen. And I mean, and again, I understand Peter was trying something new. Like, now we can make it quote unquote more seamless, but like you just said, the seamlessness of these three films is flawless.
Yeah, it's perfect.
And I think it's because they knew they couldn't rely on CGI to pull it off.
Nope, but it takes. Oh, my cats are so stupid. Sorry, they're. But again, it takes meticulous planning, which they did. They were joking in the behind the scenes. Peter Jackson was like, "So there's the window. We have one of our guys look out the window, and if the producer's coming, we start working on storyboards. But until then, we just talk about old movies." So, and they had like the storyboards in front of them, but they weren't working. So they were waiting for one of like the bigwig producers to show up and like, "Oh shit, we got to work."
That's funny.
But some of it was done on a soundstage, right? The parts of the Bilbo birthday party was a soundstage. Obviously, like where they fight that troll is on a soundstage for most of it.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Mines of Moria are pretty much a soundstage.
But you can't beat the New Zealand landscape.
No,
I know that you can travel to New Zealand now and take a Lord of the Rings tour, and they'll take you to a lot of the filming locations of Lord of the Rings, which sounds like a dream.
Well, and of course, Hobbiton is actually there.
Yes,
I would say that's really the best thing that came from the Hobbit movies is the materials that they used for this movie. Well, for this trilogy, weren't designed to stand the test of time. And the owners of that land, or when Peter Jackson contacted them, like, "Hey, we want to come out and film The Hobbit there again," they had worked out a deal where they would use more sustainable materials that would last. And so now Hobbiton is really there.
Yeah.
And I would say that's the one good thing that came out of The Hobbit, is that they legitimately built Hobbiton.
I mean, that is good news. I didn't know that. I thought it was just from Lord of the Rings that they did that.
No, it's because for An Unexpected Journey, the first probably 30 minutes is just in the Shire.
Right.
So they had to film there again, but all the stuff that they left behind from these movies
20 years
had
old.
deteriorated.
Yeah.
Had deteriorated, and so
that makes sense.
So they rebuilt it with better materials to withstand the weather and all that good stuff.
I mean, we'll probably get to it in the other films, but the amount of extras that they needed was, again, the level of these 1950s epics, to where I don't know which one it is. I mean, we'll get to it obviously because we're gonna do those movies. It might be The Two Towers, where he just filled the stadium full of people and asked them to make noises, and they just recorded those sounds for like the orcs or for like a stadium full of people. I know I once heard, I don't know if this is true, I want to preface that, but I heard that folks who live in New Zealand, who have lived there forever, will chat with one another about which Lord of the Rings they were in, because they needed so many extras that a majority of people who live in New Zealand at the time were in these movies.
Yeah, I think they put out a cast, like not really a casting call. They just put out an ad that was like, "Hey, like we'll get to it next week, but with the Riders of Rohan, they're like, do you own a horse? Do you know how to ride said horse? Come on down."
I love the guys like, man, I own one, but if only I knew how to ride.
But yeah, man, I love. I'm sure I said it at the top of the show, but I love that this is our introduction to The Lord of the Rings is through Fellowship, because honestly, it just gets better from Fellowship.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Agreed. Well, I mean, it gets a lot more. The stories get more dense. It gets darker. It gets the stakes get higher, and our characters are going through this hero's journey. Yep. And where I think each film has a sort of a sort of journey in and of itself, the entire three is that full circle, a ring, if you will, of the hero's journey. And it's remarkable. And again, I don't know if this is even look upable. Is this researchable? Is how he persuaded them to have him shoot all three at the same time? I'm
sure it's somewhere.
Because people don't let people do that anymore, or now, or ever since. You don't get to shoot three movies at the same time.
The most modern example I can give, I have two, but they weren't three movies. One, of course, being Avengers Infinity War and Endgame.
Okay.
They shot those back to back.
Sure, that makes sense.
And X and Pearl.
Yeah.
And those are the most modern examples I can give. But like I said, those are only two movies. And of course, Disney knew what they were doing with Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah.
I think Ty West just kind of told A24, like, hey, like, I'm going to be filming this movie X, but like, I've got another movie I want to film once we're done. And they were probably like, okay, cool. Do what you want. Like, we don't care.
Is it going to cost us $10 million? He's like, how about $1 million? They're like, okay.
Like, one? You had us at 1 million. And he was like, that was literally the last thing I said.
Like, dunzo. Yeah, I mean, it's unprecedented. It's crazy. I will say that one of the benefits to shooting all of them at the same time was our Gimli, his name being
John Rhys Davies.
He has the line, "No one tosses a dwarf."
In this movie,
because they had just shot him being tossed
At Helm's Deep.
At Helm's Deep. And again, that's not till another movie, but he decided to set it up in this one, knowing that it's
Dude, God bless John Rhys Davies.
That's great. And by the way, probably like I want them to solve crimes together is Gimli and Legolas. I want them to I want them to go and make a detective agency. But we'll get to their friendship later.
A True Detective style. Like
I was thinking more Lethal Weapon. TV maybe.
Well, Jeremy, with that, are you ready to wrap up?
I am. Get ready for some special guests, hopefully, popping up later in the series. I'm excited, and I'm going to watch the extended editions for the other two. I've recognized my mistake. I know what went wrong, and I know how to fix it. They just put the discs in an order that I didn't think they would. So,
and this time I might bust out my set so I can be like, how do they? Because I feel like either A, like I said at the top of the show, it's the disc has both versions, or two, they're split. But I don't know. But all right, everyone. Well, no guessing what we're going to talk about next week.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go ahead and say it. So next week we are continuing the series, and we are going to be discussing The Two Towers. Now, Jeremy, it seems like you really like The Two Towers out of the three movies.
I mean, I don't know if it's my favorite, but I love Sam's journey through the second one, and his speech at the end is perfect. His voiceover.
Yeah,
so, I think that elevates the movie. I would say, like IMDb, like most places, the second one is a little lower than the other two, but I think Sam's character development and his journey and his trajectory through the story makes it above where I think most people put it.
I agree. Yeah, and of course, with The Two Towers is when we get the introduction of Faramir, like we mentioned,
and we get Andy
introduction.
Serkis.
Yeah, we get a full Andy Serkis. Love that dude. Love that dude so much. I'm sure you didn't know this, but he was second unit director on the Hobbit movies.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, man. And The Two Towers is... It's so good, man. Like, I mean, all three of these movies are great, but like, Return is my favorite.
Sure,
but
of course.
The Two Towers is right. Like, it's right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't wait to talk about it. And again, we might have a special guest on.
Yep.
Which would be very exciting.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, everyone, we hope you enjoyed part 1 of this 3-part series that we're doing. Again, if we didn't talk about something, you know what, we're not perfect. But let us know in the comments, which we know you won't. But if you do, great. But again, we hope you enjoyed it, and we will see everyone next week for The Two Towers.